Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm Jessica Tarlov, and today my guest is Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin. Senator, thank you so much for being here.
It's a joy to join you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, totally my pleasure. And it's, day 21 of this shutdown. Republican lawmakers are literally marching to the White House today in a show of unity. But after weeks of federal workers going unpaid and key services grinding to a halt, what kind of lasting economic impact or political scars do you think this shutdown could leave behind?
Look, first of all, let me really be clear here. I don't want our government to be shut down, and I have voted 7 times to reopen our government and to bring down healthcare costs. And, what we're looking at is all sorts of scars from this presidency. I think about the impact on people's health care from the passage of Trump's signature legislation, the big, beautiful bill, as he calls it, what we call the big ugly bill, but how that is going to decimate health care and nutrition services for so many Americans. And then the impending expiration of the Affordable Care Act tax credits, which are going to, in my state, mean that folks are going to see doubling, tripling, quadrupling of their monthly premium expenses if nothing is done. All of that stuff leaves scars, in addition to what you're talking about, which are the folks who are both furloughed during this shutdown, as well as those who are exempted and coming to work and are missing paychecks. We want to reopen the government and deal with this health crisis together.
What's it going to take? So Senator Thune, Leader Thune, as I should call him, has said that he'll put a bill forward just on the ACA subsidies, see where that goes. Mike Johnson seems very immovable in the House, though. Can you see any light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah. So first of all, what's it going to take? Many have concluded that it's going to take Donald Trump looking at the Republicans in the House and the Senate and say, just fix this. Right? That's what it's going to take. And that until he says that, Speaker Johnson is going to be a loyal soldier for Donald Trump, no matter what happens to devastate his constituents in Louisiana. And John Thune will toe the line, no matter what's happening to his mostly rural constituents in South Dakota. And that's the sad part of it all. Ultimately, we know that Donald Trump is going to conclude that he will lose the midterms. He will lose potentially both houses of Congress if he doesn't act or require Congress to act to fix the healthcare crisis that, by the way, he created. And so I think that that's what it's going to take. I think Donald Trump at some point is going to say, let's just fix this. And release Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune from the grip that he holds over them. But this idea of reopen now, let's have a conversation about health care and the Affordable Care Act later, it does not work. These cuts are imminent. The Affordable Care Act tax credits expire at the end of the year, but on November 1st, people start shopping and purchasing health care, or they're going to look at what they're paying and say, there's no way I can afford this. And millions are going to lose their health insurance.
Yeah, they always say, well, just get it from your employer. But then you're going to have to force employers to give insurance because that's how they get out of having to deal with this problem as well.
That's right. And it means that farmers and small businesses will lose their employees to those larger corporations that can afford to offer health care to all of their employees. And I've talked to so many small business owners who rely on the Affordable Care Act for their own health insurance. These entrepreneurs do that for themselves and their families, but their employees do too. If you're a restaurant or a family farm, this is devastating.
Absolutely. I wanted to get your take on a comment that your colleague John Fetterman made a couple of hours ago. He's, caught in the hallway, as reporters like to do, asked him about the filibuster, and he said that he's in favor of the Republicans nuking the filibuster in order to reopen the government.
Republican colleagues have proposed nuking the filibuster to force the government to reopen. What do you mean?
Yeah, of course. Carve it out for that, absolutely. We ran on that. We ran on killing the filibuster, and now we love it. You know, it's like carve it out so we can move on.
Where do you fall on that?
Look, right now, we have to deal with the rules as we have them, right? And so I want to reopen the government and bring down healthcare costs. That's what I'm squarely focused on. I'm happy to have a philosophical debate about the filibuster and its, its strengths and weaknesses. And there's been several reform proposals that I have supported. The one that I think is most attractive is one that Democrats actually tried to advance during the first 2 years of Biden's presidency, and that's a talking filibuster. And that would require still folks to actually have to come to the Senate floor. And the whole idea of a filibuster is to allow people to weigh in on the matter in front of the Senate. But the thing is that we don't have talking filibusters anymore. People just use it as a way to, prolong the time between getting onto a bill and the final vote on it. If we had talking filibusters, everyone would have their say, and then you'd get to a simple majority up or down vote on passage at the end of that. And we tried to do that with the voting bills, the John Lewis Voting Rights Reform Act, because democracy was at stake there. So, I mean, that's the danger of asking a senator about the filibuster.
I should have
believe
known. I was like, oh, she'll just say yes or no. And
right. No, I believe in filibuster reform. I do not believe that we should get rid of it outright.
There, we nailed it. Okay. I want to talk to you about this big editorial that came out in the New York Times yesterday about moderates, which I'm sure that you saw, and you were also shouted out in this article. And they were making the case using actual electoral data that the Democratic candidates that performed the best, and also on the Republican side, but the big focus was on Democrats, are the ones that tack to the middle. Could you talk about how it is that you have been successful kind of strategy? And specifically, I was very interested in the fact that they shouted out this idea that you should actually be more socially moderate and economically liberal, whereas we used to think it was kind of the opposite, that people wanted fiscal conservatism and social liberalism, but that a lot of the success stories that we've had have been candidates with the inverse proposition.
Yeah. So I just want to tell you how I do it. You know, it doesn't prove their thesis and it doesn't disprove it. My formula, what I've always done, is show up all over the state, red parts of the state, purple parts of the state, blue parts of the state, rural, suburban, urban, and listen. And then take the fight that my constituents want me to take to Washington, D.C. And right now, and during this last election, no surprise, it was about the high cost of things, which is why I'm engaged in this fight right now to try to bring down their healthcare costs, and fighting on other fronts to bring down the cost of things for folks so that they can afford to get by, so they can afford to get ahead. But I think, whether you call that moderate or not, it's listening to what is on their minds, what concerns them, what keeps them up at night, and saying, I've heard you, and now I'm going to go fight on those issues.
Yeah, it also requires, though, a willingness to be a little bit of a maverick, at least within the party orthodoxy, because one of the main things that you were talking about was cutting regulation. And now you've seen other Democrats all over the country kind of having to bite the bullet and say, oh, abundance politics may have a place here for us.
Yeah. So, obviously, there's any number of areas where there is bipartisan agreement that we need to review years upon years of regulation, et cetera. Permitting reform has been a big issue where there is a lot of middle room for agreement. And so if we're talking about permitting reform with regard to energy projects, we're talking about folks who are supporting green and renewable energies, understanding that we need a new transmission and distribution system, as well as those fossil fuel loyalists who are looking at permitting reforms. And so when we look at the fact that people on all ends of the political spectrum want something, I'm of the idea of where there's a will, there's a way. And so I really look for those areas where there's clearly a will.
I like it. Just get results. The getting SHIT done caucus seems good. I wanted, before we go, ask you about Paul Ingrassia, who is Donald Trump. That face says a lot. So we already knew that he had forced a subordinate to share a hotel room with him in the past, but in this kind of spate of text messages that have come out, he says that he has a real Nazi streak in him. MLK Day is a holiday from hell. And I think something about how you can never trust an Indian. There are a number of Republicans that are urging the president to withdraw his nomination. Is that your expectation?
I would certainly hope that that nomination is withdrawn. The racist and callous things he has said, it is disqualifying. And it saddens me that it takes that much to get some of my Republican colleagues saying that he's unfit and unqualified for this position. But I just have to say, there's been a whole bunch of folks that my Republican colleagues voted for, who are in places of trust that should have never seen the light of day. And so this has been a pattern with Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, and your colleagues who rubber stamp things, and then they're
Yes.
so remorseful. And you start hearing, especially RFK Jr. is the one that really gets me the most. And all of the doctors, like, Dr. Cassidy saying, like, we can't have vaccines anymore. And you're like, you voted for the guy who told you he hated vaccines. It must be so frustrating to work with them. I only have to talk about them.
Yes. Well, and the idea that they were given promises and commitments that were ignored on day one after my Republican colleagues voted for confirmation of those nominations. It is, I remember Chairman Cassidy listing off all the commitments that he had gotten from RFK Jr. in exchange for his yes vote. And I can't think of any of those commitments that were actually kept by RFK Jr.
Oh. If the guy at the top doesn't keep his promises, then why would you expect his cabinet to?
Right.
Senator Baldwin, it was great to have you.
Thank you for
Thanks.
having me.